Last week, I set myself an arts and crafts project. I wanted to make a scrying mirror. These are also known as black mirrors and witches' mirrors. And I did just that. This is the mirror, and I'm really, really proud of it. If you want to see how to make one for yourself, I will leave the video linked up here as well as down in the description box. But on today's video, I wanted to show you how I use scrying mirrors and a technique that you might want to employ within your own magical practice. So firstly, let's talk about scrying. What is it? What does it mean? And also, why is it done? Scrying is a common practice within the witchcraft community, but I can understand if you're new to the practice or outside of it, why you might never have heard of it before. Scrying is one of the many different forms of divination. This is a group of practices that allows us to gain information. Sometimes that information might be from our psychic and subconscious minds. It might also be from servitors, familiars, guides, spirits, angels, ancestors, and many different entities that we may choose to work with. Some of the most common forms of divination that you'll likely have heard of would be tarot cards, oracle cards, even crystal balls. And if you've ever seen someone use a crystal ball, you've essentially seen someone scrying. The art of scrying is different from other forms of divination, such as tarot cards, runes, and ogham, because you aren't using magical items with symbols on them in order to gain information. Instead, you are simply peering, seeing, and gleaming information from the act of looking into an object. The item that you use within scrying varies person to person, practice to practice, with people using various things from candle flames to bodies of water to crystal balls and black mirrors or scrying mirrors. This is what we're specifically going to be talking about today. Now, a scrying mirror is simply a black reflective surface. So some people would consider a smooth, flat body of water that is very dark in nature to be essentially a natural scrying mirror. Other people consider scrying mirrors to be specific objects. Now, I have two within my own collection. The first is probably the most desirable form of scrying mirror, that being a black obsidian scrying mirror. This is actually a polished piece of obsidian. This is a really interesting material to work with. It has a lot of protective properties, and so a lot of people will find it useful as offering both protection as well as a divinatory surface to scry through. Now, as you can see, that is my ceiling light. It is very, very reflective, but they're also not necessarily the cheapest. I think I got this one for about 20, maybe £30, and it has a little bit of damage on this side just up here, which is probably why I managed to get it for that price. Scrying mirrors will vary from being £25, £30 up into the several hundreds of pounds, depending on the size and the quality of the mirror. The better the finish on it, the more expensive it's going to be. The bigger it is, the more expensive it's going to be. Usually you can find them in specialist witchcraft and occult stores, which makes them not accessible for everyone. And because obsidian is a form of glass, it is highly, highly fragile. If I were to drop this, I think it would shatter into a million pieces, which is actually kind of terrifying. So if you have pets or you have small children, this might not be an ideal thing to have around, because once it breaks, it's often kind of expensive to replace. An alternative, I've got a hair stuck to my lips, I can feel it. Where is it? Where is it? I can feel it. I have a mirror right here, why am I not using that? Second use of a scrying mirror, okay. Another form of scrying mirror is one that you can create yourself from a picture frame. Now, you can get them, but you can also add a lot of energy and intention into them by creating it yourself. Consider it a little bit of an arts and crafts project. That's what I did. So this is the scrying mirror I made in last week's video. It is simply a glass and wood picture frame. This bit is the glass. It was once clear, but once you paint it black on the reverse side, it becomes highly reflective. This is as reflective as the obsidian one, but it's considerably bigger and considerably cheaper. Of course, you are going to have to buy the supplies to do it, but you don't have to decorate the edges like I did, so you don't even necessarily need a real wood picture frame. Instead, you can just buy a generic picture frame that you like the look of and just paint the glass. This kind of tool is really accessible. For me, because I had paintbrushes and I already had the paint, it cost me £5 to make this. You can add and adapt it as you see fit. Please see the other video if you do want to learn more about that. And if it breaks, it's not super expensive to be able to find a replacement. It also means, as mentioned in the previous video, that you can tailor this mirror to suit what it is you want to work with. So if you want to do your scrying just generally, you can create a mirror like I have. This is just a general scrying mirror. If you specifically want to work with a servitor or a familiar, perhaps a god, goddess, or other spirit, entity, angel, etc., you can put their sigil, their name, their information into the back of the mirror, and you are essentially creating yourself a portal for communicating with a specific entity. You can decorate it with different protection symbols if you do want additional protection, and while it's not guaranteed to entirely lock on to who it is that you want to talk to, and it's not entirely guaranteed to protect you from everything, it can give a lot of comfort if that is something that you do want to work with, and it can make it easier. Now, I will put it in here because I think it is useful for people who are on a really, really tight budget, that if you want to scry and you don't have an obsidian mirror, you don't even have the money to buy yourself a picture frame, or maybe you aren't able to do the arts and crafts required, you probably carry around an effective scrying mirror all day, every day. This is my phone, and as you can see, it is also very, very reflective. And so you can use an off phone as a scrying mirror. Of course, it's not going to be as big as, say, a picture frame mirror, but it's certainly bigger than my little tiny obsidian one. And so it gives you an option if you don't have anything else, or maybe you're brand new to it and you don't know if you're going to like it or not. Do make sure though that your phone, tablet, whatever it is that you're using is actually turned off, because otherwise you might find that it just kind of disturbs you midway through your scrying session by having a giant ass bright screen. So just bear that in mind, but it's an option if you don't know if you're going to like it or not. Now, as mentioned earlier, scrying is different from other forms of divination because it doesn't rely on predetermined symbols and signs. If I were to draw the Three of Swords in a tarot deck, I know what that means. It gives me the imagery to work on, it gives me the information in a book or online that I can draw on if I need additional assistance. If I were to draw a specific rune, such as Fehu, I know exactly what it means because I understand the meanings that were put behind each of the symbols. The same applies with the Ogham, or Oracle cards, Lenormand, or practically every other form of divination out there. You can use it entirely intuitively, but a lot of them have something that you can fall back on. When it comes to scrying, we are working with our subconscious and psychic minds. Because of that, the symbols and the images that you might get out of scrying are not necessarily going to apply the same to everyone else. So it's a technique that is going to require a little bit of patience, time, and practice. I would not expect anyone to be able to get it instantaneously, so give yourself a little grace and don't be too deterred if you don't get it straight away. Without the symbols and signs that you might get from a tarot deck or a Lenormand deck, a set of runes, you're really going to have to be connecting deeper with your psychic abilities. And this can really help in developing them further. Not only may your psychic abilities come through to you, but so may deities, guides, spirits, servitors, familiars, and any other entities, including ancestors that you have around you. They may feed through you, and so it is something that I would recommend carrying out in a quiet space. So you need quiet, and you need some kind of surface or mirror to look into. The other thing that you might want to bring with is a candle. This can be your light for this session. If you aren't able to have candles, then just make sure that you can dim the lighting as much as possible. You don't want there to be anything harsh around you. Alongside this, make sure that you have all distractions turned off. So put your phone in focus mode or turn it off entirely. Tell people that you're going to need a little bit of quiet time and not to be disturbed. Try to keep everything as peaceful as possible. This doesn't mean that you need to sit in total deafening silence. It can just mean that you have something on in the background that's very ambient, that's not going to be a deterrent, so that you can focus more on the working at hand. You're also probably going to want some kind of notepad around you. When you're doing a scrying session, it can be really easy to forget the things that you've experienced, and so having a notepad that allows you to jot stuff down during or after is really good. And something that I would recommend, but is optional, is a clock, a timer, or some kind of alarm. Now, I know this seems a little counterintuitive given that I just said don't have any distractions, but when we're scrying, we can drop into a trance-like state, and sometimes we can completely lose track of time. You might think that you've been doing it for 5-10 minutes, you've actually been sitting there for 2 hours, so I would recommend having something that allows you to keep track of time, or having an alarm to bring you back out of it again if you do find yourself in that situation. It's nothing to be particularly concerned about, it's just that if you're planning on doing something for 15 minutes and end up doing it for 3 hours, that's going to impact the rest of your day, so just bear that in mind. So while this might sound like a lot of things that you've got going on here, it doesn't have to be expensive or difficult. It can just be a sheet of printer paper and a pen that you just find lying around. It can just be that you turn off your big light and you put on the side lights, or you have a candle sitting inside a jar that you are able to use for this particular purpose. Your scrying mirror can be as expensive and elaborate or as cheap and simple as you like. The main importance here is your own subconscious mind. That is where the focus needs to be the most. Every intricate decoration, every additional thing is simply that. It's an addition. So let's set the scene. We're sitting in a comfortable position where we are able to gaze into that scrying mirror. The goal here is not to be looking at anything in the mirror. We don't want to be staring at this light fitting, because that's not what we're aiming for. The scrying mirror is a medium. It is something we want to be looking through, which is why a lot of people find a flat, dark surface of water to be particularly useful. Instead, you're going to want to be having it so it is looking at nothing. We are staring neither at something nor at nothing. We are looking essentially through the mirror, like a looking glass, for instance. So we are essentially allowing ourselves to zone out into that mirror. So this could involve you unfocusing your eyes. I've done this before on this channel just so that you can see what I mean if you don't know what I mean straight away. But when I'm looking at the camera itself, I'm looking like this. When I am no longer focusing on the camera, I look like this. Now, I can see two cameras right now, but I'm not actually focusing on anything. My eyes are just completely relaxed. I'm not forcing them to focus. And then I'm focusing on the camera again. This is something that you can do for short periods of time. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for long periods of time, but if it allows you to just get that process of not focusing, of looking through or looking past something, then that could be a great technique to just try and give a go and get used to doing it. So if I were to be using the mirror, I would be positioning it in such a way where it's comfortable for me to hold, and it's also not looking at anything. I'm not seeing the reflection of anything but the ceiling in the mirror. I'm then allowing myself to relax my eyes into the surface of that mirror. I'm not looking at the surface, I'm almost looking through the mirror. The mirror is simply a place that allows me to rest my eyes. And then I can just sit like that in this state. I might have ambient music going, I might have some dim lighting going, and I'm just allowing myself to look into that mirror. And as you're sitting there and you're doing that, you might notice a few unusual things begin to happen. You might notice that you have colour appearing in that mirror. You might find that you have what appears to be a mist developing over the surface of that mirror. You might see lines or symbols, small images appearing. You might get smells that you normally would not experience, or you might hear things that you are not expecting to hear that appear to be coming from nowhere and everywhere, all at the same time. Being in this state of being aware, but not necessarily present, allows us to tap into our subconscious mind and draw on things that we might not notice are around us all the time. It also, much like in trance meditation and dreams, offers a space where deities, spirits, servitors, familiars, ancestors are able to come through to you easier than they would at other times. And so you can use this as a time where you can commune with individual beings, or as a time that allows you to look inwards and answer questions. As things come through to you, you can jot them down as you do, or you can wait until the very end to note them all down. But just like with dreams, you'll often find that when you come out of this divinatory, scrying, trance-like state, what you have experienced is going to slowly blur and become less present to you. So the sooner you can write it down, the better, because it means you'll remember it more. Now, you can adapt this technique depending on what it is that you want to learn and where you want the information to come from. So if you want just a general scrying session, you are just interested in seeing what's going to come forwards to you, you don't have to do anything more than what I just described. You can simply do that process. If you want to work with a specific deity, a specific spirit, a familiar, a servitor, you might want to build this into the mirror you are creating. So you might want to include the sigils of those beings in the back of that mirror as you are creating it, so that you can really use it as a portal to connect to them directly. You, however, don't have to. You can simply reach out to them at the start of that working, request that they join you in your space. This could be a compass, this could be a circle, whatever it is you feel comfortable with, and request their aid in answering questions. This doesn't guarantee that they are the only being that is going to be able to come through to you, or that your own subconscious mind won't come through to you as well, but it is a way of adding their energy into that space to potentially gain answers. If you want to do this for a specific question or topic, then you would come into that scrying session with that topic in mind. You might ask the question or verbally state the topic and then gain information from it that way. And you can also use these kind of mirrors as a focal point for things such as automatic drawing or writing. That notepad or piece of paper that I mentioned earlier can be really useful for this. People who are interested in getting into automatic writing or drawing, I will just refer to it as automatic writing for the rest of this video though, otherwise it's going to get confusing, often struggle with knowing what to look at, what to focus on, and how to go about doing it. This is a way of doing it that allows us to set that mirror up. It gives us something to focus on so that we can then undertake that automatic writing. So if you have a picture frame as an example of this, then you can literally set it out as you would a normal picture frame on a side, because they usually have one of these. So you can set that on a table in front of you in a place that allows you to look into it. It doesn't have to be completely empty of anything, because you are simply using it as a way of focusing on it so that your mind can be elsewhere. And then you will have a notepad or a piece of paper next to you. You're essentially going to be zoning out on that black mirror, on the reflection in that black mirror, and then you are allowing anything to come through to you and essentially writing it out. Allow yourself to completely zone out. Your hand is going to be doing whatever it is it's going to be doing over on one side, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, it really doesn't matter. And then you will find as time goes on, you really don't notice the passage of time. I've met several people who are phenomenal at automatic writing, and they themselves have even said that it gets to the point where you don't even realize how much you've written or how much you've drawn. You literally just feel yourself going and going and going, and then eventually you just fall off the edge of the paper and you have to turn it over and do another side. And once you get used to doing it, it's something that you can gain so much information from, especially if you do want to work with a servitor, a familiar, deities, and that's a way that you find effective for getting information. When we're working with these figures, especially servitors, familiars, and ancestors, we may be asking questions to gain information. And so you can always build it into your servitor or request that your familiar work with you through automatic writing as a way of giving you additional information. If, for instance, you don't sleep well, or you don't dream well, or you don't remember your dreams, or you struggle with meditation, it could be a way of being a little bit more active in that situation without having to just be staring at nothing while you're doing it. Now, of course, there are many, many ways of adding to your scrying techniques and different things that you can do to amplify that energy. You might want to be doing it at certain times of day or night. A lot of people will use them during the witching hour period between midnight and 3 a.m. You may want to be doing it at certain moon phases, depending on the specific questions that you have in mind. Or you may want to be adding to it, as I mentioned in my mugwort video, such as washing the mirror down with mugwort infusion, or drinking mugwort tea beforehand, or burning specific incense that's designed for divination and trance. Now, of course, as mentioned in that video, please always be careful when you're taking anything inwards that you are not going to be damaging your health. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it is safe. And so make sure you're checking. Do not take mugwort if you are pregnant or breastfeeding, but it is an option to kind of magnify and add onto those practices. So this subject is really, really varied, and how things are going to come through to you is really going to be up to you. Your brain is going to come up with symbols and signs and images, and it's going to very, very much depend on your life experiences and your magical practice. Don't necessarily expect that the images are going to come through as something would if it was reflected in that mirror. We are using the mirror as simply a tool to tap into our subconscious mind, and oftentimes images are going to come through in your subconscious mind. It is non-physical sight, or you might get feelings, sensations, something might brush against your arm, you might get phantom smells. All these things that you might experience with the clair senses are essentially what we're working with when it comes to scrying. So if you think that you aren't getting anywhere because nothing is appearing in the mirror itself, do remember that this is simply a tool for tapping into the way your mind works. It's not necessarily the mirror that's doing the work, it's you. And probably the most asked question that I get about scrying as well as dream divination is, how do I know what the signs mean? Now, of course, there are so many books out there about signs and symbols, about dream dictionaries and what everything means, but you're working with your mind. your mind, or you're working with familiars, servitors, deities, ancestors, what they are giving to you is designed for you to interpret. It's really, really hard for an external person or a book to tell you what that sign means because they don't know what it might represent in relation to your life, your history, your family tradition, the specific area where your deity might come from, the land spirits that you might be working with, etc., etc. So this is why it's really important to write everything down, and ideally I'd recommend dating it as well and then adding any questions that you might have asked. It allows you to take some time to look inwards. During the moment you're doing that scrying, you shouldn't be thinking about what it means. Instead, you should simply be documenting the things that you are experiencing and coming back to it later. Otherwise, you run the risk of breaking yourself out of that trance-like state. So instead, after the fact, leave it for a little while, have some food, come back to it, and then have a look at what those things might represent individually, and then what they might represent in relation to the question, and finally, what they might represent in relation to one another. A little bit like how you would if you were reading the tarot. This allows you to get a well-rounded view of each symbol being independent as well as being part of a collective. You might want to add a little bit of a note at the bottom to describe what you think it might mean, and then come back to it at a later point and see if that's actually what it meant. Now, when it comes to doing scrying, a lot of people are really nervous. They see a black mirror and they immediately think, ooh, something bad's going to happen here. Now, this isn't always the case. As with all divination, it has potential hazards. If you use tarot cards, you never necessarily know who might reach out to you. Much like if you were using a pendulum, or a Ouija board, or a spirit board of any variety, and the same with a scrying mirror. Now, the bonus with scrying mirrors, more than anything else, I suppose, is that more commonly you are tapping into your subconscious mind. And so if you really want to, you can lock that mirror. I will leave the video for that up here and down in the description box. That way, nothing is going to be able to enter that mirror and get through to you if that's something that you don't want. And so that's one technique to make yourself feel more comfortable. If you want to ensure that you are working with only your subconscious mind, you can create a circle as well as wearing personal protections, as well as locking that mirror and having protections on that mirror if that is something you want to do. If you want to work with only specific spirits, you can create a circle or a compass that is specifically created to keep everything other than these set individuals out, and then you can go about it that way. There's lots of options, but as with everything in life, nothing is 100% assured and nothing is 100% safe. Every single thing has danger. There's the reason why things say 99.9% effective. It's because we cannot guarantee 100%. The world is never black and white. And so I think that's really important to bear in mind. People always ask me, is witchcraft safe? Is divination safe? Crossing the street isn't safe, and yet people do it all day, every day, because it's something where we are able to assess the dangers. With all things in witchcraft, I recommend understanding what you're getting into and knowing how to protect yourself. And when you've got those things down, you can feel a lot more comfortable entering into different circumstances, workings, and divination techniques. So I hope that this video was useful. I really hope it gave a little insight into my technique for scrying. I would love to know how you do your scrying. Do you use water? Do you use candles? Do you use clouds? What is it that you work with? And if you use a scrying mirror, what's your technique like? If you do enjoy this video, give it a like, it means a lot to me. If you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. And with that being said, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!